city by the troops of Charles V in 1527, German soldiers went on a 6-month rampage against the church and its officials, committing many atrocities in what came to be known as the Sack of Rome. As in war, so in life. When you are involved in a conflict with another person or group, there is something you are fighting over, something each side wants. This could be money, power and position, on and on. Your interests are at stake, and there is no need to feel guilty about defending them. Such conflicts tend not to be too bloody. Most people are at least somewhat practical and see the point in preventing a war from going on too long. But those people who fight out of a moral sense can sometimes be the most dangerous. They may be hungry for power and are using morality as a cover. They may be motivated by some dark and hidden grievance, but in any case, they are after more than self-interest. Even if you beat them, or at least defend yourself against them successfully, discretion here may be the better part of valor. Avoid wars of morality if you can. They are not worth the time and dirty feelings they churn up. Reversal. The moral offensive has a built-in danger. If people can tell what you are doing, your righteous stance may disgust and alienate them. Unless you are facing a vicious enemy, it is best to use this strategy with a light touch and never seem shrill. Moral battles are for public consumption, and you must constantly gauge their effect, lowering or raising the heat accordingly. Here are further reflections on the righteous strategy. From The Mind of War, John Boyd and American Security, by Grant T. Hammond. Colonel John Boyd paid particular attention to the moral dimension and the effort to attack an adversary morally by showing the disjuncture between professed beliefs and deeds. The name of the game for a moral design for grand strategy is to use moral leverage to amplify one's spirit and strength, while exposing the flaws of competing adversary systems. In the process, one should influence the uncommitted, potential adversaries, and current adversaries so that they are drawn toward one's philosophy and are empathetic toward one's success. From Introduction to Strategy, by André Beaufra. The central feature of the exterior maneuver is to assure for oneself the maximum freedom of action, while at the same time paralyzing the enemy by a multitude of deterrent checks, somewhat as the Lilliputians tied up Gulliver. As with all operations designed to deter, action will of course be primarily psychological. Political, economic, diplomatic, and military measures will all be combined toward the same end. The procedures employed to achieve this deterrent effect range from the most subtle to the most brutal. Appeal will be made to the legal formulae of national and international law. Play will be made with moral and humanitarian susceptibilities, and there will be attempts to prick the enemy's conscience by making him doubtful of the justice of his cause. By these methods, opposition from some section of the enemy's internal public opinion will be roused, and at the same time some sector of international public opinion will be whipped up. The result will be a real moral coalition, and attempts will be made to co-opt the more unsophisticated sympathizers by arguments based upon their own preconceived ideas. This climate of opinion will be exploited at the United Nations, for instance, or at other international gatherings. Primarily, however, it will be used as a threat to prevent the enemy undertaking some particular action. It is a point worth noting that just as in military operations one captures a position on the ground and thereby denies it to the enemy, on the psychological plane it is possible to take over abstract positions and equally deny them to the other side. The leaders of the Soviet Union, for instance, have turned into their own preserve the peace platform, that of the abolition of atomic weapons, while themselves continuing to develop them, and that of anti-colonialism, while themselves ruling the only colonial empire still in existence. It may therefore be that these ideological positions occupied by the forces of Marxism may one day be conquered by the West, but this presupposes that the latter, in their indirect strategy, have learned the value of thinking and calculating instead of merely trying to apply juridical or moral principles which their enemy can use against them at every turn. From The Mind of War, John Boyd and American Security, by Grant T. Hammond. How should a regime pursue a counter-guerrilla campaign? Colonel John Boyd laid out an array of tools. Undermine the guerrillas' cause and destroy their cohesion by demonstrating integrity and competence of government to represent and serve the needs of the people rather than exploit and impoverish them for the benefit of a greedy elite. If you cannot realize such a political program, Boyd noted, you might consider changing sides now to avoid the rush later. Take political initiative to root out and visibly punish corruption. Select new leaders with recognized competence as well as popular appeal. Ensure that they deliver justice, eliminate major grievances, and connect the government with its grassroots. From Rules for Radicals, by Saul D. Alinsky. It is a world not of angels, but of angles, where men speak of moral principles, but act on power principles. A world where we are always moral, and our enemies always immoral. The Concept of the Political, by Carl Schmitt. Humanity as such cannot wage war because it has no enemy, at least not on this planet. The concept of humanity excludes the concept of the enemy because the enemy does not cease to be a human being, and hence there is no specific differentiation in that concept. That wars are waged in the name of humanity is not a contradiction of this simple truth. Quite the contrary, it has an especially intensive political meaning. When a state fights its political enemy in the name of humanity, it is not a war for the sake of humanity, but a war wherein a particular state seeks to usurp a universal concept against its military opponent. At the expense of its opponent, it tries to identify itself with humanity in the same way as one can misuse peace, justice, progress, and civilization in order to claim these as one's own and to deny the same to the enemy. The concept of humanity is an especially useful ideological instrument of imperialistic expansion, and in its ethical humanitarian form, it is a specific vehicle of economic imperialism. Here one is reminded of a somewhat modified expression of Proudhon's. Whoever invokes humanity wants to cheat. To confiscate the word humanity, to invoke and monopolize such a term, probably has certain incalculable effects, such as denying the enemy the quality of being human and declaring him to be an outlaw of humanity. And a war can thereby be driven to the most extreme inhumanity. And lastly, by Thomas Hobbes. Successful wickedness hath obtained the name virtue when it is for the getting of the kingdom. Chapter 26. Deny them targets. The strategy of the void. The feeling of emptiness or void, silence, isolation, non-engagement with others, is for most people intolerable. As a human weakness,